Hi, I'm Steve Antunovic. This is the Victorian Croatian Chamber of Commerce Business Brief. With me today is Steve Milicevic. Steve is the principal of Milicevic Lawyers, and today we will talk about wills, power of attorney, and advanced care directives. G'day, Steve. How are you?
I'm very good. Thank you for having me today, Steve.
Good to have you with us. Thank you for joining me. Steve, wills, power of attorney and advanced care directives, most people would see that as a bit of a minefield. Your firm does a lot of work in this area and you do a lot of public speaking on these matters. Let's talk about why it's important for people to understand the changes and to get the right advice early. Can we maybe start with how is this relevant to, say, a business?
Sure. Let's see. Firstly, with the business, powers of attorney. A company can issue or appoint someone else as its attorney to make decisions for the company, but for directors themselves, they can't appoint a power of attorney to act as a director. Now, this is standard across all company constitutions, which I know not many clients read. We do, especially when we're asked about succession planning, et cetera, in relation to a business. Obviously, why is it important is to ensure that the business owner can transfer the assets, for example, under a will that they've created in the business. So it's important to look at it both from a personal perspective of the business owner and then also from a business perspective, as in what structure is put in place and who owns those assets and by what method can we then use to transfer those assets either during the lifetime of the business owner or when they pass. A critical thing for businesses is to think about these worst case scenarios, especially if you're in partnership with others or in business together, I should say, because what you really don't want for yourself or for your other co-owner, for example, is to be running a business with someone that has no idea, that inherits the part of the business and has no idea how to run the business and runs it into the ground or stalls it or just frustrates the whole process. And you also want to ensure you maintain and capture that value and for it to continue either in your hands or in someone else's or for the whole business to be sold and then the value divided up or the, whatever you get for it gets divided up amongst the business owners.
Yeah. So you mentioned there's been some changes in Victoria in this area. What are some of the key changes?
Victoria's undergone a thorough review, particularly in relation to powers of attorney. The wills aspect hasn't changed too much, but powers of attorney has. And there's been a couple of 2 or 3 key amendments being made to powers of attorney themselves. So the general powers of attorney, the witnesses and the formalities of it has changed, but especially in the medical area, that's undergone some massive changes. There's no longer a thing that we can call a medical power of attorney. It's now you appoint a medical decision maker, and then an individual also has the ability to make what's known as an advanced care directive, which we might touch on a little bit later because it's almost its own specialty area, if you like.
Okay, all right. What would you suggest at this stage before we get on to the other one is what would be the best approach for people to take?
In relation to getting a will in place, a power of attorney, et cetera, couple of things. Talk to your doctor, actually. Important in relation to medical treatment decisions. Some people have health issues, et cetera, that they need to be mindful of. If you haven't got a will or certain powers of attorney or advanced care directives in place, that can expose you to things that you may not necessarily want. Absolutely do talk to your accountant as well. You need to understand as a business owner, for example, what structure you have in place, who owns what, and what would happen if you were to pass away. Where do the assets go? Obviously, key to this is also speaking to a lawyer who will be able to tell you, well, if you pass away, the shares in your company would go to X, Y, or Z. If you have a will, having a review of that to make sure it's still effective. Clients we have usually make a will and then put it in the bottom drawer and it sits there for a decade or two. But family or personal circumstances can change, whether it's by divorce or children, et cetera, et cetera. And so there's two aspects to look at it, both from the business perspective and then the personal assets perspective in relation to wills. And it does require some deep thinking or reflection personally as well about who you want to get your assets in the end, who you want to own the business when you're not here or not able to make decisions. And it's important to also discuss it if you are in business with others, with your co-owners, to talk through a handful of these key scenarios. We get clients asking us to facilitate that, if you like, or go through those questions. It's quite uncomfortable thing to do sometimes, to talk about death and what happens if, one of us gets into a coma, who's going to make the decisions, and having that sort of succession plan, if you like, within the business to make sure the business continues in the way that you all want when something terrible happens.
Yeah, clear message there to look at these things well before you get into some sort of a crisis or a family health issue. Very clear. Steve, just about advanced care directive. Can we talk a little bit about what is an advanced care directive?
Sure. Look, unless you have a senior person in your life or family member, probably no one's even heard of these things. They are new, and really, it's a directive that you make to your medical decision maker or your treating doctor about what treatment you want when you no longer have mental capacity to make decisions about your medical treatment. There's two types. One is a values advanced care directive, and the other one is an instructional advanced care directive. The values one is really you telling others that you value certain things and to give you medical treatment accordingly. Now, it's not binding, so the person doesn't have to do what you say, but they need to consider and make the decision that you would have made if you were able to. So as an example of that, it may be that I'll use myself as an example, and I hope my wife is listening because I've told her this a few times. If I'm in a coma and there's no chance of resuscitating me, turn the switch off. Okay. Why is that? It's because I value quality of life, not length of life. And if I can't communicate, if I can't live, well, my value is to turn the switch off. Now, if it's a values directive, what that means is I'd like them to value that. Okay, so I want them to think from my perspective, but it gives them the chance also to make a different decision, if you like, because it's a value. Another thing might be that I strongly value a religion. So, Roman Catholic, and I would like to ensure that that there's a priest come to visit me before they do flick the switch off, for example. You can give that sort of a value to that. There's a questionnaire that we run through with clients that goes through these sorts of things. If you can or can't communicate, how highly do you value that? If you're not able to control bodily functions, it can go into some things that people find very difficult potentially to discuss with their loved ones, but it's important to get in place, especially if you want a strong values to be carried through when you're not able to make decisions. On the instructional side though, these are requirements that your treating doctor needs to follow. So you can either agree to treatment in advance or refuse treatment in advance. So the classic example I give there is if you're a Mormon, for example, you may absolutely refuse all blood transfusions because it's against your beliefs. So in the instructional directive, it's very clear, I refuse all blood transfusions. Or it could be, do not resuscitate me if I have a stroke or heart attack, et cetera, et cetera. Now those, or the advanced care directives need to be signed or witnessed by a doctor. And the reason for that is when they sign, they do certify that you have the mental capacity and you understand what you're saying or the instructions that you're giving in these advanced care directives.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does, especially for me. I've had some personal experience in these areas recently, and luckily we did get onto some of this whilst the people involved were still able to make those decisions rather than waiting too late. So some really, really good advice and information. Thank you very much for that.
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
I probably would like to talk to you some more about this, but for today, thank you very much for joining us here. And thank you from the Victorian Croatian Chamber of Commerce, and I look forward to speaking with you again soon.